So here we have two figures who are playing a game of something, and I just like the picture. It looked relatively sort of simple in a sense, and I thought I'd have a go at doing a little bit of a little bit of a rough sketch. So my initial pencil sketch, which you can see here, is I am just basically boxing the figures in. So you can see I've got a box for that sort of shape of that torso and head here, and I've roughly drafted in um, the sort of shape of the chairs. So that's if I'm doing a sketch, which I don't always do a sketch. Sometimes I'll just go straight in with the fountain pen. But here, I've actually gone to the trouble of doing a sketch. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to refine that a little bit. So we've obviously got one layer of pencil here, so I'm going in with a second layer of pencil, and I'm just firming up some of those lines. There's a tiny bit of perspective in this, just a tiny bit, but not enough to actually have to construct it. And I'm working quite large here. This is A4. Yeah, this is A4. So when I'm doing figures like this, what am I actually sketching? Well, I'm drawing the outside of those areas. So I'm drawing, the outside of somebody's legs, their clothing. I'm going around the edges of the clothing. I'm going around the edges of their bodies, their hair, as you can see here, their face. But I'm also looking for those contour lines and those lines of sort of demarcation between one element and another that the human eye will pick up on. So, say for example, if you do a side view of the human body, you want to show an ear on the side of the head, and you want to show the outside of the ear and maybe just a couple of tiny details inside the ear, so it reads as ear. If you know what I mean. You don't have to do absolutely every single detail, and this is the same story with all the clothing. Is you want to give an outside shape roughly, and then give a feel for how the clothing's moving, or how it's constructed, or how it's sitting inside a knee, or something like that. So what you're actually doing is you're abbreviating. You are creating a visual shorthand for every single element in that picture. Now that picture, like a lot of digital pictures, is made up of pixels, so it's a pointillization. Every single byte of data is a separate element, and obviously that creates the picture we see on the screen. But what we're doing here is we're effectively zoning in and collecting those separate, pixels effectively into one area and classifying that as this is what I'm classing as coat. Here is what I'm classifying as neck. This becomes head. You know what I mean? Now, how you choose to do this it's one of the cool things about drawing. How you choose to do this is completely up to you. You can go down the route of what I'm doing here, which is effectively going to be a vague line and wash sort of technique where I'm creating areas and then I'm going to splash a bit of paint or ink over the top of it. Or you could go down the route of just doing it all in cross-hatching, so you don't actually use any lines at all. Or you could, go pure pointillism and stipple the whole thing. There's absolutely no right or wrong way to do it. There's just the way that you enjoy working. Well, at this stage of the drawing, what I'm doing now is I'm starting to harden up and make some decisions about where I want creases in clothing to be. I'm putting those chair legs in more definitively, and I'm kind of getting to the point really where what I'm doing is the final line work, but in pencil. So I've got my little Kaweco Sport trusty little plastic fountain pen here, and I do like to use it unposted, i.e. not with the cap on the end of the pen, and it's so short and stubby, I can hold it halfway down and it just feels super comfortable. I enjoy sketching with it. It feels fun, if you know what I mean. Okay, so I don't know why I really started in the bottom right-hand corner of this picture. It doesn't make any sense. Normally, if you're right-handed, you want to avoid rubbing the lower palm of your hand across the ink because you can smear it. So logic dictates you should always start in the top left corner and work down to the bottom right corner, sort of diagonally, and then there's no chance of you actually, smearing your own wet ink, as it were. But here I've decided just for the sake of being a rebel, Now, if you look at the way that I'm creating the clothing shapes, I'm using a slight sort of continuous line method. I'm trying to keep the nib on as much as I can, and I'm trying to create here some details in the clothing, some ripples and creases to basically give it a little bit of life. Now, I think it's quite easy to overdo these, and I think I'm kind of in danger of doing that a little bit here. Obviously, I'm replicating some of the pencil work, but yeah, if you put too many creases in, it can start to look a little bit odd. I think this figure here, perhaps is a better resolved. I quite like the level of shorthand on it, if you know what I mean. Uh, it's got enough line work on to be interesting, but without feeling the line work is going to dominate the colour that goes on. I'm not quite sure about that nose, but ho hum. So that's one of the figures done. Now you can actually go to the trouble here of adding in a little bit of shadow detail. Now, if you're going to be using just a single colour wash, which I am here, so effectively it's more of a sort of tint, then you can put in some of the shadows with your pen. What I'm doing here is I'm creating a thicker line around the outside of the object. Now this is again a style thing. I just like it. I think it makes it pop off the page a little bit more, and I quite like a bit more of a graphic style. So I'm using the back of the pen here, very thin. You can create a very thin line using the back of the pen, just to add in a little bit of detail of the seam across the trouser there, and then I'm obviously going on here to do the game board. I'm not quite sure what game they're playing there actually. It looks like a sort of form of drafts or something. So I don't know why I've gone to the trouble to draw the bag that's clearly under the table. I think it maybe just felt it added some sense of sort of authenticity. So obviously I'm drawing the legs at the front before I draw the legs behind, because the legs in the front will cover the legs behind. And when you're drawing anything really, you tend to, but personally, I tend to start with the foreground first, and then I draw the items as you go back, and that ensures that you don't actually, cross over where you shouldn't, if you know what I mean. So again, I'm going to sketch in. I obviously haven't made. I'm adding that flask there that I'd forgotten to put in originally. So I'm going ahead and sketching in this other figure now, trying to come up with a simple plan, a code, if you know what I mean, an abbreviated form of language that says clothes rather than, um, drawing every single thread and trying to draw every single element. I think when I'm drawing these clothes in, I try and use the continuous line method because it adds a bit of style to the image, and I just think it feels appropriate, if you know what I mean. Um, but again, I would say, try not to put too many creases in the clothing. So this figure's arm is actually quite hard because the elbow is facing directly to you. Because if you look at his placement of his hand, it's sort of rotated round and pointing back towards his body. So it's not a very natural, even though I think it's sketched reasonably accurately, it does look slightly odd, that arm at the front. But sometimes you've just got to go for it. I think one of the other elements of this drawing, which I think ultimately didn't necessarily work in the end, was the leg on the. He was resting his leg on the gaming board, but it looks like he's almost stretching it out there, and I think somehow it didn't quite work that. So I'm just adding in the details here around the face and the head there, and then again there's the aforementioned leg there propped up on the side of the on the gaming board there. Just trying to think about how I can draw that foot, that sole, simply, but so it reads, if you know what I mean. So really now I'm looking at that and I'm thinking it could do with some slightly heavier line work on the figure on the left, to make it stand out a little bit more, as I've done with the figure on the right. I think there's a bit more contrast there. So what I've done here is I've got my Opus 88 fountain pen, which has got a slightly thicker nib than the little Coeco Sport, and I'm starting to just put a tiny bit more line weight on some of those elements around the outside of the figure there. Now this is a beast of a fountain pen. It's absolutely massive. It's completely opposite to the Queco Sport. It's funny how the two pens I use the most are like the tiniest and the biggest. Now you may have noticed there quickly I put in an extra couple of dots on some of the line work. Again, that's a real affectation, and I think sometimes it just adds a bit more of a sketchy vibe to it. You can see there I've added a couple of dots. That isn't, like I say, that isn't no way part of the construction. That is just a style thing. It's a little bit like paint spatters. It's equally as decadent. So I think adding in that thick line there around the trouser is good because that quickly defines it as a separate leg from the other one. And there's a school of thought that says that components in the foreground should have thicker outlines than components as you get further back in a picture, which is a sort of technical style of product design drawing that I did a lot when I was younger. So again, I'm just working on the line a little bit, the line ways. As I did earlier on the other side. Sorry, I'm just adding in some a little bit more weight around that top of that chair. So we can see now how that's working in its sort of entirety. I think the sketch is pretty balanced. Now I've got a couple of options here. I could leave it there and just paint that up. Or if I'm going to be using, which I've decided at this point, I'm just going to use some simple ink washes. And I want to add a little bit of weight to certain elements within the sketch to denote light and dark and shadow. So to get that sort of tonal value in, I'm going to go with some cross-hatching. I do really enjoy cross-hatching images. I think for me, it's often the difference between what you class as a drawing and a sketch. Now, these are sort of arbitrary terms in my head. I think of a sketch as very much something you do quickly, and it's almost an aide-memoire or a reference type thing. Whereas I think a drawing is something which is more of a finished, considered. This is in danger of becoming a drawing, I think. So really, it's a question of how much do you crosshatch? Because particularly if you're going to be using 2 or 3 layers of crosshatching in different directions, you can create some really quite complicated and nuanced shadow work. So it really depends on how far you get. And often what I'll do is when I'm doing a drawing like this, I'll use 1 layer of crosshatch, and then I'll step back and have a look at it and go, is that enough? Because like a lot of art, I think it's a case of it's very easy to do too much. It's very easy to go over the top and to sort of spoil the sort of simple, clean energy of the piece, if you know what I mean. So I know what I'm thinking at this point. I'm thinking about shadows under the chairs. Should I do that? What else can I do? But I think I just go with the decision of being like, you've done enough, leave it at that. So with these inks, I didn't have any very realistic skin tones at all. I think at this point I've just pulled out 3 inks, or I know these are the Octopus inks. So what I should have done is I should have mixed a little bit of skin tone up with watercolour, but anyway, never mind. So yeah, that's a default skin tone now. So the Octopus inks are quite bright colours. So what I've gone for here is a bit of a colour pop, essentially. Now it may look a bit weird what I'm doing here because I'm going outside of the lines and I'm not being very careful really with my with my painting. Now that's on purpose. I wanted to keep this really loose looking. Sometimes when you purposely paint outside the lines, I think it can look really cool. I've done a tutorial on my YouTube channel, which you're on now, so you should be able to find it. And that is where I've drawn some fruit. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but simple. It'll be simple drawing exercise or something like that. And that is purposely what one of those tutorials where I've gone way outside the lines for style, for the effect of it. Basically, it can be quite cool, I think. Oh, I'm spilling my tea. Now the other thing that I'm doing here is adding some spatters, which I know is a personal thing, and I know it's an affectation. But I just think it gives the picture a little bit of life. Now before I've gone in with the pink, what I've done is I've used the hairdryer to dry that off. Now you can see that's knocked back the colour a little bit, because when it dries like watercolour it will go a little bit paler. I'm using this really contrasting pink, which is, is a lovely crazy colour. There is a real temptation to sort of paint it all in, to go, well, the shoes are black and that carrier bag under the table, and then the pieces on the thing they're orange, and to start like colouring in. But the whole joy, I think, of these kind of sketches is there is a I was going to say a shortcut, but that's not the right word. There's a kind of visually speaking, it's truncated. Does that make sense? It's kind of an abbreviation of a drawing, and I really like that idea. I generally like art where you can see the craft in it. I think where you can see that there's the person who has created that has developed practice, and it isn't just Duchamp's urinal or some newspaper that's been rolled up and paper mache into a phallus or something weird. I like it when you can see an element of craft in the art, but I also like it to look like it's got vitality. I like it's been sketched, like someone sat down and just created that. I think for me it's a sort of fine balance between a very specific practice and then something that feels quite free. So that's all dry now, and you can see that those pigments have been really knocked back, so they're a little bit more muted. And these are the inks that I've been using for this. It's the Octopus Write or Draw collection inks. And now, so if you enjoyed that, let me know, because I'll do. If you enjoyed that, let me know. I'll do some more figures in the future. Okay, cheers then, guys. Bye.